It's like, I'm not a baby Christian. I mean, I just recently got baptized, but like, I'm not like, this didn't happen yesterday.
Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. I am Jen. This is Fundy Fridays, and here on my channel I talk about different aspects of Christian fundamentalism, American conservative politics, pop culture, and gay stuff. Today we're going to be talking about something that's a recent event, but it kind of like catapulted me back to like 2015, 2016, because today we're going to be talking about Kat Von D. Now, she used to be the owner of, I can't remember the actual name of her makeup company. I think it was just called Kat Von D Cosmetics or something. Well, actually, Jen, it was called Kat Von D Beauty. I never bought any. She was like the it girl of the alternative scene for a while. And she got her start as a tattoo artist. She was on Miami Ink and then LA Ink.
I love this city. It's so good to be back in LA, doing what I do best.
I'm opening up my own tattoo shop.
And I've lined up some rockin' clients. It's Hollywood, babe, and we're open for business. I'm Kat Von D, and this is LA Ink.
Something that Kat has been accused of, and I agree with, is being friends with some not so wholesome individuals. I don't know, various rock stars like Marilyn Manson to other disgraced racist makeup artists, Jeffree Star. But what actually got her canceled was her anti-vaccine stance, which she has since like walked back on, but not really. I wanted to be a little tiny bit fairer and give some full context here. Yes, Kat gave an interview saying that she was uninformed and is not against vaccines, but she also very annoyingly, in my opinion, said something to the effect of, just try being a pregnant home birthing vegan, you wouldn't last a day. And don't think I didn't see this comment either. And even if she recanted the anti-vax thing, I'm still highly suspicious, seeing as how she was sued by a former employee for refusing to mask up, saying she didn't believe in the pandemic, and calling masks maxi pads of the face, just to name a few. And I think it's very interesting that she has just pulled a Brittany Dawn, and she is now I don't know if she would consider herself evangelical, but she's a conservative Christian, in my opinion.
All of heaven is rejoicing right now. Kat Von D shares video of baptism after renouncing witchcraft and the occult.
She left LA because of like too much government oversight. She moved into this tiny rural town in Indiana, bought a Victorian mansion because of course she's got to have the coolest, gothiest Victorian mansion. She's having her dad, he is fixing up the house, the mansion, and she is living in her pastor's house as a part of the parsonage, which is like money allotted for housing for people involved with the church. A fun fact about me is that I was actually copyright claimed for this clip that I'm about to show you. So I have to talk over most of it so that it's transformative enough not to ping the YouTube algorithms. So thanks, Theo Vaughn. Here is a shittier version of the clip I was going to show you all.
So we live actually at our church's parsonage. So the pastor from our church lives in Louisville, and so him and his wife they drive up every Sunday.
This multimillionaire is living somewhere for free, and she's kind of hiding out in a small town where the population is so small and elderly that it's really not likely that any of the people know who she is. And let me tell you, that is a little bit relatable. Sometimes you don't want to be perceived, but it's just very weird, and we're going to get into it because Kat, if you haven't figured out by now, she has gone Christian. She's still wearing her dark clothes, and she likes to make a big deal about how all the Christians judged me for being goth. Even though it's like, hey, lady, if you did about 2 seconds of Google searching, you would see that there is a huge goth and alternative and like metal scene of Christians. So she could easily find a community there, but she just wants to be different and persecuted. So, and then she did an interview with Allie Beth Stuckey where she talked about, you know, being on fire for the Lord. And then she did an interview with Theo Vaughn, who is huge on TikTok. I don't care for him. In that interview, she told us way more about her actual like beliefs than I think she did in the Allie Beth video. Because this is where she's talking about like the parsonage and the government stuff. So we're going to get into that. I am so excited to talk to you about it. This is one of those things where like I noticed it on the YouTube algorithm and I haven't just got to talk about it because, you know, we had Halloween and then I don't even remember November. I blinked and it was gone. And then all of our Christmas episodes. And so now it's finally time to catch up. And I think this is a great example of the kind of stuff that I'm going to be talking about this year. I will still be talking about, you know, like Girl Defined and the fundies that are the most like influential and well-known. If you haven't noticed, Girl Defined is being talked about by literally everyone on the online. It's no longer just a little thing. Like everybody is talking about Girl Defined because they just represent this new generation of social media evangelism, and they just stick to this old doctrine that is not very popular because it is harmful and it is hateful. So I'm going to be talking about, you know, people like that, and I'm going to be talking a lot more about pop culture, and I want to do more movies, and I want to talk about more like theologians and high control groups. So that's kind of where we're pivoting this year. Not that different. I just, Kat Von D, Allie Beth, yeah, we can talk shit on them. They're rich. They are not relatable, which is ironic because that's Allie Beth's name of her show. They're just out of touch. They are a part of a hate group, and they actively want to take away our rights and basically, you know, usher in this Christian theocracy. Kat Von D, you may recognize that name. You might be like, wait a minute, didn't she used to be like the biggest fucking deal ever on YouTube? And you were right. She used to have a YouTube channel. She would vlog all the time. She was constantly putting out new products. She was like friends with everybody from what I saw. And then she had a bunch of issues. She was canceled for coming out and saying that she was going to raise her son vegan and vaccine free. And I don't really have a strong opinion about raising a child vegan. I don't care, quite frankly. But the vaccine thing seemed really like a dog whistle, but she got so much backlash from that she basically lost her company, and she went into hiding. And she has since come out and said that she was misinformed and she doesn't mean that anymore. But like that's kind of a non-statement. And it's like also like, no, I don't think that we should be like super into the medical history of her child, but it's the fact that she was such a public figure and she was like, you don't make a statement like that unless you're trying to convince people of your opinion and get them to also be non-vax, or if you're trying to like make a statement about how like crunchy you are. And this was in like 2016. I will obviously fix the date in editing. If Kat Von D, her real name is Catherine von Drachenberg. She was born in Mexico. Her parents, at least her dad, I believe, is German-Argentinian. And they were missionaries. That's how they ended up in that area of the world. I'm not sure the ethnicity of her mother, and I swear I have a reason to bring this up because I am aware that it is problematic for me as a white person to ask, well, where are you from? I'm only bringing it up because Kat identifies as Latina, and she has used this in the past as some sort of plausible deniability that she could, you know, never possibly be racist.
The ones that are calling me and my family Nazis, those are the ones that really just don't sit well with me. I mean, if anything, they're extremely offensive and just super hurtful, not just to me, but to my family. I know a lot of, you guys do know, but I know a lot of you guys don't know that I am myself a proud Latina. I was born in Mexico, in Montemorelos, in Nuevo León. I know that a lot of people just assume that I'm white because I was not lucky enough to inherit my mom's really beautiful dark skin. But I do have her dark eyes. But I think that it's important too that people know that us Latinas come in all different shades of brown.
And for the record, I want to state that I am not accusing her of being racist. I think she makes really, really stupid mistakes when doing stuff like naming her makeup. I also think it's very problematic that she keeps dating these racist and abusers. Is she misunderstood? Did we take her out of context? That might be, but 1 time is a mistake and 3 times is a habit, and we're going to get into that in a minute. I just wanted to let it be known that I'm not trying to, call her something that she's not, but I have to report on what I think, So they were missionaries for the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which I don't know much about them. I used to live next to a Seventh-day Adventist church, and they seemed like kind people. I know that they do church on Saturdays, and a lot of them are vegetarian. But other than that, I don't really know much about the religion. But I think it's interesting that she didn't go back to Seventh-day Adventist. She's now going to a Baptist church. So yeah, she had an interesting life growing up. Her grandma was a piano teacher, so she taught her piano at age 6, and it seemed like she had a pretty normal life until she hit those teen years. And she says in the Allie Beth interview that she was like rebellious and listening to punk rock music and dropping out of school and all things that are like very normal for a teenager to go through, but her parents thought that she was possessed by a demon.
Not to mention, like, my poor parents, they're not Americanized by any means at this time. Like, they're coming from a completely different culture. They really believe like their child has been possessed by a demon, you know, and which is not the case. I tried to explain that to my parents, but they, it's a different generation. And
so they sent her to a troubled teen farm. She actually went to Provo Canyon School. Yes, that's in Provo, Utah. That is the same troubled teen ranch that Paris Hilton was sent to.
I don't understand why these institutions are even still legally, available to parents. But I think that's like for another podcast. And basically, it's just, how would you describe it? I call it a lockdown facility. It's a place where parents write off their rights to their child and put them in the hands of people with no supervision. And there was just a lot of abuse, not to me, that thankfully I didn't have to endure some of it. I think there was some mental abuse, obviously, but nothing physical that I saw with other people there. And
was it a religious institution or no?
It was. I wouldn't say it was religious, but the people that worked there were all. It was in Utah, so they're all Mormons. And but they didn't like make us go to their church or anything like that. And no, it was just I think honestly it's like a big scam where they just scam like scared parents out of money. And I was there for about 6 months. I lied my way out of there, and then was taken to like another like kind of like a transitional boarding school like situation. By that point I started drinking.
You're about 16, 17? Yeah.
And so I started drinking not for fun. It was for to cope with probably some of the trauma.
I wanted to be serious for a second and talk about the troubled teen industry. Kat barely scratched the surface in this Allie Beth interview, but on her Instagram, she actually went into much more detail about the abuses she suffered at Provo Canyon. I'll play a short clip in a second, but I just want you guys to know that no child should ever have to endure something like this, and these places need to be shut down immediately, and the people in charge of them should be held accountable and face repercussions. For more info on the troubled teen industry, listen to Gooned Podcast or watch Let Us Pray.
And I had no idea what was going on at the time, and I obviously was terrified. And I ended up going with these people. They put me on a plane with them, and then we landed in Utah, which I had never been to in my entire life, and so I didn't know where I was. And then we got in a car. They blindfolded me so that I couldn't see where we were going. And then once we got there, they did a strip search, which was completely degrading. I remember having to get naked in front of this person who I don't know if they had credentials. I had no idea who they were. And basically they were just degrading me the whole entire time. And I was 15 years old. I was still a fucking kid. And they put me into some hot pink sweats and gave me some sandals, and then they took me into another room and then shaved my head. And so basically that's how I learned through this binder that my parents had basically signed away my rights to this facility. And it was a program to rehabilitate troubled teens, and there was no way out. One of the problems that my parents had was obviously that I wasn't going to school and that I was tattooing, that I chose to start my career at that early of an age. And I understand, my parents, they weren't Americanized by any means. It was a really scary time for them. I think they felt out of control, and I think that they were basically just trying their best to try and help me. And I just think they were wildly misguided and told that something like this would be a solution. A few days later, a counselor set me aside and told me that I had contracted HIV and that she was sure that it was from tattooing. And, as a 15-year-old, I had no idea what to think. I didn't know how I was going to tell my parents, and I didn't even have the time to critically think that this could be a lie, which obviously it was. But they never told me that. I went through those entire 6 months thinking that I had HIV. They had all kinds of odd forms of punishment. If you, we were told we had to stand in line at all times, and that if you need something, you have to ask. Like if you want to adjust your clothes, you would have to ask before doing it. If you needed to cough or sneeze, you'd have to ask prior to doing that. If you don't, you would get docked points or get different forms of punishment. One of the common punishments that I saw and endured was having to sit in a chair facing a wall for hours on end. Some girls had been stuck staring at a wall for days. And if they fell asleep or fell off their chair, they would just get docked more time. And my parents had no idea what was happening in this place. And that's why I think I never was mad at them. Because I know that if my parents knew what was going on in places like this, they would have never let me stay there. They would have come and saved me. If you acted out, they would come around and inject sedatives into your butt and either put you in a straitjacket or just sedate the hell out of you to where you were pretty much in a coma, and they would put you into the solid, into isolation.
The fact that parents relinquish custody to these places so that they can beat the rebellion out of their kids, that's abusive. You should never do that. You should never trust somebody to do that to your child, and to think that there's something that's so wrong with them that they deserve to be left in the wilderness, starved, beaten. And there's absolutely no repercussions because the parents signed off on all of this. I just wanted to bring that up. She did have a very hard life growing up, and anybody who's ever had to go to one of these branches, I am so sorry, and you deserve, I don't know, the world for what you've gone through. So, yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. Kat officially, I think, dropped out of high school at 15 or 16, and she started living with boyfriends and getting tattoos and just being involved in the art and music world. She appeared on 2 seasons of Miami Ink. When did that come out? 2005? I could have swore it was earlier than that. 2005, yeah, I would have been watching Degrassi. But she got a spinoff. Let's see, how old would she have been on Miami Ink? I guess I forgot to tell you her birthday. That might help. March 8th, 1982. So 2005 minus 1982, 23. Damn, that's young. So I guess she left the show. There's some inconsistencies with the story on how that happened, but she ended up with her own show, LA Inc., and she had her own shop, High Voltage Tattoo, in Hollywood. So I never watched any of these shows, so I don't know what the storyline was, but I recently found out from this old apology video that Kat did that she left the show because of harassment of some of her coworkers, and she did not name who they were, and people were trying to guess, but it sounds like she had a really hard time, and like she ended up getting like groped and harassed, and I mean, yeah, I'd want to leave too.
Needless to say, none of this type of behavior ever made the air, and eventually I just had enough, and I ended up having to quit off camera.
On the show, she broke the Guinness World Record of most tattoos given by a single person in 24 hours with a total of 400. Neat. When she left the show, allegedly, this is alleged, and I'm also not sure how much I believe this story. And that's not to give Kat any credit because, like, in 5 minutes, I'm going to show you how she's been problematic besides this. So, allegedly, after she left, and she allegedly signed her own headshot and addressed this autograph to Ami James, another artist on the show who is Jewish, and she allegedly wrote, "Burn in hell," not gonna say that word, XOXO Kat Von D. Kat can make some very stupid decisions. I don't know if she would have done that. Especially because she was already high profile. TMZ was already covering her. Why would she do something like that? This is literally from TMZ from 2008, so keep that in mind. This all could be completely made up. So apparently Ami went to TLC and TLC went to a handwriting analyst who concluded there is a 99% probability that Kat Von D wrote the message. And then in early July 2007, his lawyer went to TLC with the analysis, and they simply sent him a letter back that acknowledged receiving the results and said, "We trust that this information will be kept confidential." If this happened, shame on you, Kat. What the fuck is wrong with you? If it's fake, why the fuck would you fake something like this? That's horrible. That's what I feel about that. But it doesn't really matter, because shortly after this situation, you shouldn't blame somebody for the actions of their partner, but it certainly shows their lack of discernment, and shows what kind of person they are if they're willing to be in a relationship with somebody who is racist. You know what I mean? Like, so her first husband, and, you know, to be fair, they are no longer married, Oliver Peck, he has a picture of him wearing blackface. She also dated Jesse James, who had a whole Nazi situation. Her friendship with Jeffree Star, who has been racist since probably forever. They had a whole falling out over, like, I think she did some artwork for Jeffree for a product or something. I don't really care, because both of them suck. At the time, this shit was crazy. Like, this was 3 years before Bye Sister. They were both accusing each other of racism. Kat was saying that Jeffree wasn't paying employees. There was like settlement talk. This was everywhere. She did have a makeup line in 2008 with Sephora. All right, so her makeup brand was called Kat Von D Beauty, and it was in partnership with Kendo, which is the parent company of Kat Von D Beauty. But more importantly to the story, Kendo is the in-house private label brand of Sephora. So they're going to make Sephora brand stuff. Kat's brand wasn't the only one that operates in this manner. Famously, Fenty Beauty from Rihanna is a Kendo brand. It's like how, you know, Great Value is Walmart's in-house private label brand. That's not to say that Kat didn't work hard. I'm sure she was in the makeup factory messing with all the different chemicals, and she certainly was in charge of creativity and naming certain shades. So in 2015, at the height of her makeup brand stuff, she put out this lipstick, pretty pink lipstick, actually a great color. Would love to have it, except for it's named Selection with a K. Now, if you don't know what that is a reference to, those were the Nazis in charge of selecting who would go to the concentration camps and who would have this and that done to them. Very interesting that she chose that. Like, Any other name. And the other lipsticks have normal names. Why did you name the pink that? You couldn't have called it, here, let me just come up with a couple of names. Rose, bubblegum, sunset, cherry, or just fucking pink. Whatever. Like, anything. But that's not even, what does that have to do with the name that you chose? She also had a shade named Lolita, which Kat insists is named after the Japanese fashion subculture and not the book of the same name. She also had a lipstick shade called Underage Red, which she insists is named after the shade of lipstick she wore to sneak into a Judas Priest concert, which I guess, you know, she's always got an answer for everything, right? How convenient. She also named a shade Basket Case, which, to be fair, she did name after the Green Day song, but nonetheless, that is a ableist slur, I guess. And even more so, she had a lipstick shade named Celebu, you know. And although Kat refused to apologize, Sephora, who was her exclusive makeup retailer at the time, apologized on her behalf. Then there was this cotton field picture, which, you know, sure, maybe you could pretend that you don't understand the context of cotton fields and racism in America, but she left it up and found no problem with it, even though people had mentioned that it made them uncomfortable. She's also one of those vegans that likes to compare factory farming to the Holocaust. In 2017 or 2018, the timeline is murky because they had a very whirlwind romance, you could say. Kat started dating a man named Rafael Reyes, who his chosen name is Leafar, or Leafur, depending on your accent, which is Raphael spelled backwards. That's also the name of their son. He is in a band and he's super alternative, you know, been involved with various criminal activity, and he has, I think he at least has one strike under California's 3-strike rule, which I don't agree with, by the way. I don't believe in, you know, mass incarceration and private prisons and all that stuff. It's, I think, one of the reasons why they moved out of California is because he already had one of these strikes, and if you get 3 strikes, you go to prison for life. And he had an assault charge. I don't know what kind, because there's not a lot of details about it. Actually, here's a podcast clip of Reyes explaining the situation. And you know what? He actually makes it sound a lot worse.
I fought my case for like a year because they were trying to give me 7 years.
Oh, wow.
But
Whoa.
luckily, you know, which is ridiculous for what I had done. You know what I mean? I threw a glass in a bar. I was in a bar and I threw a glass.
And it just landed on a person.
It hit
yeah.
the wrong person in the arm. And then they wanted to give me 7 years for that.
Okay, so remember when we were first talking about this assault charge, right? The beginning of that paragraph talked about him saying that he was acting out because his daughter betrayed him. Well, it's time we talk about that story because it's probably one of the worst things that you're going to hear today.
It's dialogue that I'm having with those that have hurt me, and I know that I can't be in the same room with them. So if I can just express it through my music, then it works for me, because that's even easier, you know, and better, because then I can really say what I need to say. But it's if you really listen to the music, like the Young Gods album, that the majority of that album is about my daughter, you know, and how she hurt me, and it was just me trying to communicate to her, you know.
He gave an interview talking about this album he did where he was like healing from all this pain. What was the pain, you ask? Well, his friends assaulted his daughter, and he interpreted that as my daughter's sleeping with my friends. The question was, your 2011 book, Living Dangerously, is also seeing new life at the art show. What does this book mean to you now? I can't even read that book no more. I can't even look at it. I'm proud of it, but it's just a hard read for me because it reminds me of the time that had a lot of hurt. Even the music is sometimes hard to sing. It's a lot of hurt every time I got to sing those fucking songs like Love is the Enemy, Friends Are Poison, even Young Gods, where I say, deceived by my own so they could fuck my daughter. I'm talking about the guys that were supposed to be my friends. We were supposed to be having each other's back, and they were fucking my daughter. I just finally saw my daughter a couple of days ago. I hadn't seen her in 4 years because of what she did to me and how she hurt and betrayed me. I was telling my daughter, in a way, I kind of owe you because if you hadn't hurt me the way you had hurt me, I wouldn't have found my wife. You fucked up my life. You had motherfuckers trying to kill me because of that shit you did. And I'm grateful to you because now I know that those guys were never my fucking friends. I left San Diego because of all that and because of what you and those people did to me. Now I'm in a fucking successful band and I met the fucking woman of my life and I'm married to her now. But in a way, I owe you guys for fucking trying to kill me. It's a trip. So let me just say this out loud because apparently he's never heard it this way before. But a child, a minor, cannot fuck an adult. Any adult that does sexual actions to a child is assaulting them. There is no consent there because they are a child and they do not know better and they do not understand. The adults in that situation bear the full responsibility to not do anything sexual to a child. So regardless of what she told you or what your friends told you, that was an assault. The person that you should be mad at is your stupid friends. You should be mad at them. You should be directing all the hurt and anger to them. And you should have been there for your daughter who was taken advantage of by adult men and then had her father go to a magazine and do a whole fucking world tour and make a book about the hurt that she caused by being assaulted. How dare you? And you know what Kat had to say about it? Some equally dumb and offensive shit. The girl who posted that video accusing my husband of things that are completely inaccurate should be ashamed of herself. No one got raped, no one was 13, and no one was abandoned. It truly disgusts me how hurtful people can be for the sake of getting more followers. That really definitely sounds like some rape apology there, Kat. And what do you mean by nobody was 13? These men might be doing these horrible shit, and you might just be dating them, but you're also fucking encouraging this shit by saying, this didn't happen, people are blowing it out of proportion. The other main problematic thing that Leah Farr is known for is eclectic collection of religious tattoos. He has a gigantic swastika on his throat. You clearly wanted people to see this right away, the first thing they see when they see you. He is claiming that it is the Buddhist version of that symbol, and that it's at a different angle than the Nazi one. I'm going to have to invoke well actually on myself here. Yes, that symbol was important to a lot of different religions, especially Buddhists, before the Nazis co-opted it and ruined it for everyone. There is a long, rich history of how this symbol was used as a positive thing. I still would like to say that him placing it front and center and trying to act naive about the alternative meaning, I don't know. I still find it very offensive, and I do think that he is... I don't want to officially say that he is racist, but he made a very stupid decision to get this tattoo where he did and not expect people to have comments about it. Because the average person on the street is not going to see that and go, wow, you're so enlightened. You like so many different religions. You must be a cool guy to talk to. No, they see you covered in this shit and they see this giant fucking swastika and their immediate reaction is first going to be like their heart's going to sink. You also have about 100 fucking tattoo artists. You could have covered it up, or you could wear a nice turtleneck or something. So sometime in 2018, after barely knowing each other, Kat became pregnant with her son, and the couple got married in an admittedly very aesthetically cool wedding. It was a very red goth wedding, and this thing was widely covered, and I remember it like it was yesterday. And in 2018, when Kat was at presumably the top of her game, newly married, baby on the way, she makes an announcement that she is tired of the interference and judgment because she wants to have a natural home birth, and that she wants to raise her child vegan and anti-vax. And then the shit hit the fan.
I am not an anti-vaxxer. What I am is a first-time mother. I am choosing not to make our decision or any of our babies' health records public, and I just want to thank you guys for respecting that.
Kat kind of went MIA after this for a while, and in 2020, she either sold her brand to Kendo or was told to give up her brand. It's probably maybe a mix of both of those things, but here she is talking to Theo Vaughn about, how low they made her feel.
Looked me in the eyes and told me, "You're not worth anything anymore." And those words and his voice haunt me still.
All those feelings of unworthiness, isolation, cancellation, and depression that Kat was feeling was probably the biggest catalyst as to why she started examining her faith. And lo and behold, Kat became born again.
Catherine Vaughn Rothenberg, upon your profession of faith in the Lord Jesus Christ, and in obedience to his divine command, I baptize you, my sister, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
She tried to Christian herself back into relevancy. And it has worked a little bit because obviously I'm covering it, and the little Christian bloggers and stuff like Paul and Morgan are talking about it, but I'm not really sure that anybody in the mainstream even cares. You know what I mean?
And so when I think about my own walk with the Lord, it makes me think, man, she deserves all the grace in the world, and not jumping so quick to judgment of but you got baptized, why aren't you on fire now? Why aren't you dressed in all white and singing hallelujah?
To be fair, I don't disagree with Morgan here. I think Christians are being way too judgmental of Kat, but the rest of this clip is kind of shady.
It's a process, and maybe she'll never change the things that she loves, but I wouldn't be surprised if in a couple years she's even fallen away from some of those other things that she claims to love right now.
And she talked about that there's things that she used to love or used to be really into that are not tasteful to her anymore. So I hope that's the case, because still, despite even with the grace that we're talking about that she deserves, in our opinion, that music video did not look great to me, and I hope that we see through, she talked about being in a Bible study. She talked about having a pastor who's really into knows the Bible, knows theology. I hope that we see maybe people challenge her.
Totally.
Because I did not like that music video.
I mean, did I love it? No.
Not that I have to like it, but.
So she's talking to Allie, and she's saying how much she loves her show and how she listens every day, and that her and Allie are friends now because she reached out to her to become a Christian. I can't imagine how Allie Beth felt with that DM sitting in her inbox. But that's just kind of interesting because not that there's a lot of progressive Christian commentators for her to choose from. I'm sure there are. I don't see a lot of them. But it's just interesting that she chose Allie Beth, who has this history of racism and bigotry. And she's like, I love Allie Beth.
Your followers and stuff might not know who I am either. And I love that you have a very large Christian, faith-based following. And that's who I want to talk to right now versus talking to my usual fans that I always talk to. But yeah, we met. Well, I've been following you for a long time, which you probably don't know. Just stalking you on Instagram. But I love your podcast and been listening to it a lot. And you actually helped me find a lot of the answers that I was looking for at the time. And then I remember I DM'd you a few times about looking for a specific. I saw a clip of a debate that you had or a conversation that you had regarding Catholicism versus Baptist or Protestant.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I really want to see that, and I'm going to see if she'll see my DM. And then you did, and then you recommended a Bible, which I got, and I'm so grateful for because it's really helped in my Bible studies.
Allie asks her why she specifically chose a Baptist church, and Kat's like, well, I don't want to get into the denominations, but I just really like their approach to scripture. I would have been convinced that she would go Catholic because of the aesthetic, right?
I had a list of Baptist churches that I wanted to explore. And the first
one. Why Baptist? Sorry to interrupt you, but I'm just curious about that.
Well, I mean, I'm not too much into denominations either, but I feel like when I look at the breakdown of like their approach to scripture is just like aligns with what, like what I feel. So, yeah.
I mean, I'm for it, obviously.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
I'm supportive as a lifelong Baptist myself, but
Yeah.
I just was curious about that. Okay, so.
Yeah, and I wasn't born into a Baptist church, so it's like, I think like to me it's cool to be able to, like I said, as an adult have an understanding, and I looked at things like there's things about, I'm seeking more traditionalism. Like I don't, like when it comes to my worship, and this is just for me, it's like I want to worship. Like I don't want to go to a concert. I don't want to I don't like I dress, we all dress nice when we go to church. That's just our own personal thing. Like this is a sacred space, and like,
oh my God, the mega church shade.
That's how I do it. And I feel like other outlets and stuff like just didn't really align with what I'm looking for,
Yeah.
But so I feel like God just like spit me out on the doorsteps of the most perfect church for us, and we go in there, and there's it's a very small congregation. It's a lot of old people, and they were just they didn't really care about who people think we are. They were just like, oh yeah, you're the lady that bought the house down the street, and we've actually been praying for you. And like and so then I was like, okay, well, let's try this out, because it's like, I want to see if what the pastor's all about, pretty much. Like I want to learn about the Bible. Like I don't want like necessarily feel good stories, or like I'm here to learn. And then Pastor Brian is like, that's what he's all about. So I was like, man, I can't believe that we got lucky and found this place so quickly.
Then she said that the whole catalyst for her converting is that her husband woke up one day and said, babe, I think we got it wrong.
Said that you saw those as crutches and all you wanted was Jesus. So at that point you were a Christian.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. So when did that happen?
Probably like a year before that.
A year before that. So let's talk about that a little
Yeah.
bit. How did you become a Christian out of the world of just kind of spiritualism?
So funny enough, I kind of blame my husband, or give him the credit. It was during like right before, right when the lockdowns happened. I came downstairs and he just said, hey babe, I think we got it wrong. I think we got a lot of things wrong. I was like, man, maybe like, so I started just kind of like reevaluating, kind of going down the list of what I'm doing with my life and like what my perspectives are. And then it got to the part of like my spirituality. And that's where I started really rethinking a lot of things. And so I think a friend had sent me a sermon from Pastor Jack Hibbs, and I loved it. Like it really spoke to me, and like it answered a lot of questions that I had.
So I had to look up that Pastor Jack Hibbs guy, and if it's the same guy that Kat is talking about that I'm about to show you, holy shit, is this guy a piece of work. And you should absolutely be worried about Kat's propping up of this man. she said that her husband was just showing her all this crazy stuff and it was just blowing her mind. And then she mentions political things like Black Lives Matter and Antifa.
Wow.
And I was like, no, and I was never like a politically charged person. I would say like ignorant political things just out of like, because I don't watch TV. I don't like really know. I mean, I would see like whatever my friends would post or things like that, but I was never like, I couldn't tell you who's in office or anything like that, at the time. And then, so my husband was like, hey, like, I want to show you some stuff, and like it would be some articles and some videos and stuff. And I was like, oh man, like I really got to start rethinking a lot of things that I thought were true,
Yeah.
And that was kind of the first step into questioning everything I had been doing.
Yeah.
Basically, she's describing like a pipeline. She's like, I watch this stuff every day, and then it got me into this, and it got me into this, and then I just changed my whole life, and yeah, not a good sign.
The stuff that he was showing you, because you said it was around the lockdowns.
Yeah.
Was it mostly regarding that kind of thing, or was it more theological in nature, the things that he was talking about?
No, it was like revolving more around like political things. And you have to understand at that time, like BLM was going hard and in LA, and I was in the middle of it. Like I lived 3 doors down from the mayor of LA. So
Yeah.
we had Antifa like on our front yard,
Yeah.
after they had threatened to like do the Molotov cocktails and stuff like
Right.
that. And like, so we were just like seeing things in real time, and they were much worse in real life than I think what people even put on TV. And
Yeah.
so
Then Kat describes to Allie Beth how she got rid of her occult and yoga books. Yes, you heard me say that correctly.
So yeah, I think that's when I just started looking into that type of literature, and then I started learning about transcendental meditation, and I was like, oh, like it was always these very like short-lived band-aids on a sinking ship, That's kind of
Yes.
how I see it.
Yeah.
It's like oh, this feels really good, and I'm like so at peace, and I've like been able to
Totally.
like I'd have anxiety at the airport, and I'd go into the bathroom and like say my mantra, and then and I'll be fine. It's
Yeah.
like, but it was these crutches,
Right.
So now I'm gonna fast forward to like the first post that I ever made about talking about like throwing away my occult
Witchcraft,
books.
yes.
Yeah, and I think that everybody kind of honed in, my fans included, on the witchcraft books, because there was a lot more of those than there was the others. But I actually threw away all my meditation books, all my books on yoga, all my like it wasn't just the stuff that people considered spooky, which I don't think some of it is, but like it I don't want to say that they were haunting me, but it's like I already knew they were there. I have my son who's growing up and is becoming curious, and it's like there were some art books I threw away too that weren't in that picture, that were like, I don't know if I want my kid to look at that, like but to me it was like I came to this really awesome realization that night that I decided to post that, was that like I don't want these crutches in my life anymore. And that's what I really saw them as, is like, okay, like I just want Jesus, and it's a very narrow road, right? Like I feel like all these other like these breathing techniques, or these or like spell work, or whatever, like nature worship, all these things, it's like they're just crutches. They're not really like my answer.
Don't worry, guys. Kat says that just because she had an occult aesthetic doesn't mean that she ever actually practiced witchcraft.
I think people like to, especially the media, they like to sensationalize stories and make them a lot more extreme than they really are. Like I was never in a cult. I was never in I was never a witch, like a self-proclaimed witch or anything like that. I was definitely not a Satanist,
Oh, so you've always been a poser then, huh?
So I do want to go back though to like the occult stuff, because
Sure.
I don't even want to say occult stuff, but like just like the tarot cards and all that
Yeah.
stuff, like not to diss any of my friends, because I have a lot of friends that are into that stuff and I love them so much. I have actually more empathy and understanding than I think an average person, because I've been there. But I will say that my husband and I, we look at the Rolodex of friends that we have, and the ones that are dictating their life through that, and they're making life decisions through tarot or through some of the witchcraft stuff, like even the meditation stuff, or like and I'm gonna definitely offend a lot of people, but like the ayahuasca trips or the meditation camps and silent retreats, all the things that I used to do, except I never did ayahuasca, but like they're all so miserable.
Yeah.
And like they're the most broke people. Usually most of them are single. They don't have stability, and I'm talking about like both financial and like the love around them.
Right.
God, Kat is mean. And she's like, they're broke, they're single, they're ugly, nobody loves them.
The one person that I think about through all this is my husband, you know, because when we got together, we were both not Christian. You know, we got married, and then he's really helped me without knowing find my way. And he's not necessarily on the same page. I mean, in some ways he is, you know, he's very supportive. We go to church together, you know, every Sunday. He always supports me. We pray together. But there's parts of him that's still questioning. And like after that, getting so much grief from people that spilled over into my husband, he was like, I remember the next morning, he was like, babe, I don't want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
You know, and it like, I'm trying not to get emotional because it's like I've been working for years, like trying to like lead by example and share what I, you know, my own stepping stones with him to like, hopefully one day he can come to me and say, hey, guess what? Like I've given my heart to Jesus. That hasn't happened yet. But when you have like an entire community of people like attacking you, like, man, like you're, you know, not to say that my husband is like, you know, going to do something based on a comment on Instagram, but when it's getting amplified so much, like it turns people off, you know?
She went so hard on judging her friends for tarot and horoscopes, but she can't figure out why evangelical Christians are being so judgmental about her husband.
To be honest, outside of talking to you, I really don't plan too much to talk about it. And that's just my own, like where I'm at with it. You know, I feel like there are some people that have the gift of that, you know, like my pastor or like you and like Pastor Jack Hibbs or whatever. And I think that there's some people that like can be quiet witnesses, and that's me, you know, like I do better like one-on-one with people. And
I know I've been talking shit, but I do want to draw attention to the fact that I think Kat really is serious about her faith, and I do think that she is a real deal born again Christian.
So I mean, I'm on fire for Jesus. Like I don't plan on this dimming out. Like the more and more I learn, the more and more excited I get about things, and the more at ease I am about what's happening in this world and what's happening, in my marriage or in, you know, in all of it. So I'm not a baby Christian. I mean, I just recently got baptized, but like, I'm not like, this didn't happen yesterday. Like I have an understanding of a lot of the things that people are talking about. Like I'm not going to dress like how you think I'm going to dress. Like nothing's changing in that department.
Kat talks about being, I guess, a good influence for goth Christian children.
You have no idea how many DMs that I got from like other goth kids that are in the same boat as I was. They're going, man, I'm at this crossroad and I want to go back to church, but like, I don't have a church to go to. Or I feel like even within my own family unit, people have like, I'm an outcast and I'm trying to make my way back to Jesus, but like these people, you know, like thank you for doing that, you know?
She says Marilyn Manson is working on himself. Like, can we cut her fucking mic?
You know, that's not who I am anymore, you know? I met Marilyn Manson through sobriety, you know? I believe he just celebrated 2 years of sobriety now. And like I said, that was a little bit of a gateway for me to like find my way back to God. And so I happily facilitated a friendship over that. You know, I believe that all people have the ability to change. You know, Ted Bundy on his like last, final interview before being killed, had turned his life to God. And
so that sure was fun. I wonder if they're going to collab more often. But the next thing I want to talk about is
like one time I went to like a Jordan Peterson lecture, and my husband and I were like the only people that looked like us there. But I was
black people. You mean
what?
You mean black people?
I know what Theo meant, but Jesus Christ, you could not say that. Also, did you catch that Jordan Peterson name drop? She says that she moved to Indiana because of the LA mass exodus, and she didn't like the California mentality.
And I think Indiana was appealing to me because I saw like the mass exodus of California happening, and everybody was moving to Texas and Nashville, and I just wanted to get away from as much as I could from the California mentality in general.
And she talks about Indiana being supportive of homeschool families with barely any regulations.
Well, I homeschool my son, and so I like that Indiana has they're very supportive. Like the state of Indiana is very supportive to homeschool families and stuff. So that was a very big selling point for us. And
why is it hard to do? Is there like a lot of regulation with it?
Some states and different places have different, yeah. So to me, I'm like, the less government, the better.
When I set out to make this episode, my intention was not to make a hit piece about Kat. My job is not to cast moral judgments or ask my audience to do so. I wanted to explore this concept of becoming Christian as a PR pivot, or, like I said earlier in the episode, trying to Christianize yourself back into relevancy. I really wanted to know if this formula was going to work. This formula where canceled celebrities seek refuge amongst conservatives and evangelicals, and whether or not it was possible to have a life after public shaming. And I think there is. In a way, I almost feel good for Kat. She seems happy and proud of herself, although please note that this is not an endorsement of her or her character. But as someone who talks about this kind of thing for a living, I've noticed some patterns when it comes to people like Kat. I'm not going to say that she's 100% going down a right-wing problematic pipeline, but she's already getting friendly with the 2A crowd, and she recently put her seal of approval on a Christian homeschool organization. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but seeing as how she just got done writing a children's book, let's not all act shocked if she makes an appearance on Tuttle Twins someday. You know, she could be the vegan vaccine vixen or something. And lest we forget how shady Kat's been acting around COVID-19. We already know she left California because of the liberal tyrannical government, and that she refused to wear a mask. That's why I think this donating gloves thing was intended to be a distraction from her pandemic lawsuit. And honestly, I'm not even that mad about the owing back payments of rent thing, because I don't like landlords either, Kat. Sure, she has lived a hard life. She has been through plenty of traumas, and she's gotten sober and found God. And for what it's worth, I genuinely believe that she is a Christian and that she loves Jesus. Does that excuse her bad behavior, though? Hell no. Is Kat all these awful things that people are saying about her? That's not my place. After all, only God can judge Kat Von D. I mean, I'm also judging her, but what I'm trying to say is, who knows how relevant Kat is going to be in our lives in the coming years? She might, make a few more appearances on the channel, or if we're lucky, she'll keep her promise to Allie Beth and be quiet about her evangelism. When it's all said and done, I hope that for her sake she stops fraternizing with abusers, at least publicly, because that's not only bad for her career, but it makes Jesus cry. This is my baby boy. This is my son. You good baby. He's so huge now. Do you guys remember when he was just a puppy? Now he's a large grown man. Who's this large man? This is my large man. I love you. Alright, well, I gotta get out of here. Gotta let these dogs out. Gotta feed them. I gotta eat, too. See you guys around soon. I hope you enjoyed the episode. We have Patreon and channel memberships. We love you guys, and I love all the Jedi-Knights, and, please remember to consensually smash that like and subscribe button. Remember to drink water, be nice. Yeah, do your best. Just do your best. That's all that matters. Okay? And we're proud of you, and we love you. See you later. Bye! I wanna heal. I wanna feel what I thought was never real.